Hello, this is Mr. Hupp, and I want to make a video to just go through and make a simple slotted peg for your wheels. And I'm going to start from the model here that we have from Project Lead the Way. The one that Mr. Lundberg put together is for a modified version of this. So what I plan to do is take this peg and we're going to simplify it quite a bit. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to take this little piece off here to make this just a plate that is rotated, so we won't have this like little cover. And I'm not going to put the little grooves that you see along here. If you want to add those in, you'll see where to do that in the sketch. One of the things I want to point out is you should be able to, let's see if I can draw a little box here. So let's see, I'm going to draw a box. I want you to imagine a center axis here. So I'm just going to sketch this across here. And can you imagine that shape right here and then revolve it? That's what we're trying to do. So we're going to outline this shape and then we're going to revolve that to make our peg. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So let's go to Inventor. I'm going to choose new and I'm going to choose the standard IPT. And it's doing its thing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save this file as... No, gotta do something first. It won't let me save. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a sketch. I am a big believer in using construction lines. So I'm going to start with some construction lines and I'm going to make 2-point rectangles. I look at this, the overall shape is going to be about, it's got to fit in a 0.29 hole. So I'm going to make a rectangle that is going to outline just the basic shape. And it's also going to be, when I look at this, the dimensions on the drawing, it's 0.86 long, and it's going to be 0.29 for the overall circumference, or diameter, I mean. But I'm only going to do half of that, so I'm going to put 0.29 divided by 2. And that's going to be kind of where my part is going to finish out at. I also know that there is going to be a 0.4 wide little brace in the middle, and it's going to be about 0.44 from the front. So I'm going to do, and how tall is that? So that's going to be 0.48 tall. So I'm looking at the dimensions. No, it's not 0.48. And how tall is that? That goes out to 0.57 is what they used. So I'm going to just do a real quick little sketch here. We're going to do and then I'll dimension it in. So I know that the width is going to be 0.04 is what I want to use for the width. And the height is going to be 0.57 divided by 2. And then I'm going to do some things like a collinear constraint on this one. Bottom edge of this to this. And the next thing I need to do, I'm going to look at my drawing. I know that my little piece has got to be back from the front. It's going to be back 0.44. So I'm going to use a general dimension going from this edge to this edge. And I'm going to drag this up, and that's going to be 0.44. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of laying out the shape that I want to have when I'm done. Okay. Another thing I know is that it's going to have an outer thickness of a difference between about 0.04. So right here, I'm going to add another rectangle there. So I'm going to do a 2-point rectangle from here all the way across. That is 0.86, and it's going to be 0.04. Okay, and this is going to define my overall thickness. Okay, so that's the end of my construction lines. That gives me enough to work with. So I've got some basic stuff kind of outlined here. Just to make my life easy, I'm going to pull some of this away from the drawing so it's not interfering with my construction lines. I don't want that to be confusing in here. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little more so we can start drawing lines. So starting from this front edge, it has a little lip right here. So starting from right here, what I want to do is trim this little line out so that I get a nice shape here. And I'm probably going to go ahead and trim this one out too, just because that's going to make things confusing. Okay, so what I want to end up with here is a little, like a tooth on the end of this that has a slope up to this point. So, and I'm going to leave out, there's a little step in here. I'm going to just leave that out. So let's just get this, we're simplifying this a lot. So what I want to do is make a line. We're going to go up from here and connect to there. We're going to go from this point, we're going to go back 0.05. And then I want to go down to match the midpoint. Do you see? Okay, I'm going to zoom in on that. Do you see how when I go, you see how it pops up that little line going to the left and right? That's telling me I'm lined up with the midpoint. So I'm going to go click right there. Okay. And then from there, okay, it's following along nicely. I'm going to go from there to here. This is going to give me that taper. And then from this point, I'm going to go make sure it's green, click on it, and go to this. And then I'm just tracing out my part now. Tracing this part down to that intersection. And then let me move over to the side a little bit. Now we're just going to go all the way across here to that corner. And it shows a little indentation in the back, so we're going to simulate that. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit because when I was doing my practice part, I messed up right here. So we're going to click on a line that goes from here to the midpoint of this line. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see that. So, man, I am in close. Okay, see the midpoint there? I'm going to click on that. And there's a line that goes from here. Let's click on this. There's a little indentation in the back. And that indentation is about 0.05. So we're going to put the dimension 0.05 right there. And then we're going to go from the end of that line to our construction line. And then we're going to follow the construction line. Let me zoom out a little bit. We're going to follow this construction line all the way back to this. And then we're going to go zoom out a little more. Let me center. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Let me center up our drawing again. Turn my line back on. And go from this line down to the construction line down here. And then we go from this line to that line. And then I go from that line up to this intersection. And then I'm just going to go straight across. On the original drawing, it had a little inset here. I'm not going to worry about that. If you want to draw that, you can. One other thing I want to do is I'm going to add a line. And it's going to be a center line. I'm going to turn off construction line at this point. It doesn't have to be part of your drawing. You can put that anywhere. So I'm just going to get on this axis over here and draw that center line. Okay, I didn't even make it part of the part. One of the things I've noticed is sometimes you guys are putting your center lines and then you're drawing your actual profiles on top of those center lines. You can run into some confusion there if they overlap each other too much. So I'm going to finish my sketch, and now I have this weird little profile of this part. So I should be able to click on revolve and choose that profile, and it is going. So it picked up the center axis and rotated everything exactly the way I wanted. Okay. The other thing we need to deal with is the front portion has a, if we go to this view, this has a slot cut in it, so we need to cut that slot. So we're going to start a new sketch, and I'm going to choose that face. I'm going to make a little rectangle. When I look at the little, I'm just going to draw it off over here right now. That slot is going to be 0.04 wide, and that opening is, or that diameter should be 0.29. So I'm going to go a little bit outside of that. So I'm going to go ahead and set my length to 0.31 just to be a little bit bigger so that I make sure I get things cut through. And then I'm going to put 0.04 for the thickness. And then I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to add a construction line through the center. So the reason, and I'll show you the reason for that in just a moment, but I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. Actually, let's do this. Find the midpoint of that line and pull it straight down. And I'm making a rectangle. I don't want a rectangle. I want a line. I want a construction line. Midpoint straight down. Okay. And I'm going to place a point on the middle of that line. Okay, so I drew a rectangle, I drew a construction line through the center, and then I put a point in the midpoint of that line. Okay, what that's going to let me do is if I do a coincident constraint between this point and the center of this circle. I may have to project the geometry. Didn't have to. All right, and I can finish my sketch now. So what that did is that put a nice little rectangle across the front of that. I'm going to extrude. I'm going to choose that profile. For some reason, it is not picking up my little drop downs here, but I want to make this the second direction, and we're going to make it a cut. And if I look at my dimensions here, it says that that cut is 0.2 deep. So I'm going to set that depth to 0.2. Okay. And then that looks kind of boring, so I'm going to go up here to the materials, and I'm going to find something that looks kind of fun. How about nickel? Okay, so I made that nickel, and now I have a little part that looks kind of nice. So if I kind of rotate him around, you can see that I've got that little groove in the back, and it goes back to a flat plate in the inside. It's got a little slot there. So this is not nearly as detailed, but it shows you enough of what I want you to learn, and that is making the profile first, thinking about a circular shape in terms of a profile and rotating that. Also using construction lines to guide your dimensions so that you're not getting into these multiple constraint situations. So that should be enough for this peg. It should work for our purposes. Oh, so the last thing we need to do is we need to save this. Right now it's part 1, so I'm going to hit Control S, and I'm going to save this axle peg is what we want to call it. And put your initials at the end. Oh, and I had my caps lock on. Remember to use uppercase. Axle peg. Okay, so there it is. That ought to get you done.